All right. Hello, Wolfgang. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well.
Yeah. Excited to talk to you. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, really. So
Neither
this is
do I. It makes two of us.
awesome. Let me see your shirt. What's going on? Awesome.
Yeah,
Very
from the X
cool.
Files.
Yeah. So this is going to be fun.
Okay.
All right.
And I hope you
So
don't mind. I'm gonna leave my hat on because it's really cold in here. It's like 1 degree in Nebraska right now.
no, I was just telling Mike earlier, the shirt I had on, I think I was wearing for like 4 days in a row. It's all good. Don't worry
Okay.
about
Actually, funny enough, I used to have one of your band T-shirts
it.
that I
Yeah.
wore for years and years, and like I swear I had the only one on Earth. And one time, Sam Rosenthal actually came up to me and he's like, I won't do his voice, but he's like, "That's one of my bands." That's when I lived up in Portland, and he was actually one of my neighbors, so that was kind of
Oh
weird.
my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, and he's like,
Yeah,
you have one of my band shirts on you," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, I know who you are too."
that's hilarious. So you guys are like neighbors or were neighbors or yeah, because you're in
Yeah, we
Nebraska.
were. Well, this is when I lived in Portland. Yeah, we were neighbors, and what was really weird was I was neighbors with him and Jello Biafra.
Interesting.
and and there was one time when I mean, it's kind of weird when you meet like rock stars who,
Sure.
because I would see Sam Rosenthal and Jello Biafra in my Safeway,
Right.
and like Jello would be like, I remember one night I was standing there and trying to find something, and I hear, "Oh my gosh, why are beans so damn expensive?" And I'm like, "That is Jello Biafra."
That's
And it was
really
just, yeah, so it's kind of surreal, but I guess everybody else has to buy beans and put the.
I know. I'm like, I wonder if I was in that scenario, if I would try eyeing what they were buying. Knowing me, I would because I'm a bit of a voyeur like that, but not in a creepy way. I'm just, people are endlessly fascinating to me as much as they can be annoying, but, and
Right.
over mundane things like, when people post pictures of themselves, I'm always looking at the stuff in the background. Like, what is their house like? What kind of interesting things do they have in their background?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
yeah.
It's like looking in the
You're
medicine
hiding
cabinet.
everything from me.
Yeah, well, I can take this down, but it looks like I'm in a basement portrait cellar.
It's all good.
I'm well,
So,
I actually am at a basement. I'm in my wife's store, so
oh, that's cool. And what is her store?
it's called Solstice in the Veil. We are a metaphysical supply store.
Cool.
Uh, that's at least what we're listed as with Google, but we sell witchcraft stuff. So
Okay. That's interesting. And you're in Nebraska?
yes, in La Vista, Nebraska, it's one of the little suburbs of Omaha. So
So, oh yeah, okay, cool. So, you said you lived in Portland. Are you
yeah.
from Portland or?
No, I'm actually from a little teeny tiny town that is about 3 hours west of Omaha. That's
Okay.
out in the middle of nowhere. Which actually, if we when we talk about the aliens thing, I'll talk about that a little bit. But I'm from a little tiny town out there, and then I moved to Omaha. Um, Literally, I think I had my bags packed in the car. The day I graduated high school, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and and yeah, and I started working at a record store like immediately after that, trying to work my way through college, and that's how I got familiar with Lycia and all the
Cool.
bands from Project and that type of stuff. So
That's cool. Yeah, I've heard that Omaha is really cool, like a really great place.
it is. It's surprising because it's kind of funny because when I moved to Portland, and I moved to Seattle before Portland, but I remember seeing trends that were happening in Portland that had already happened here. So it was,
Really?
yeah, in music trends and stuff, especially in the zeros and when emo was really popular and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I wasn't really into emo, but all those bands that were on Saddle Creek Records, like I literally like knew those guys. Like I'd been to their house, I worked with them, that type of
Yeah.
thing. People like Connor Oberst and Todd. I keep forgetting what he's called now. Fink. Todd Fink. He had a different name when I knew him, but from
Yeah.
the Fink in those bands. But yeah, I used to work with those guys, and hang out with
Oh,
them.
that's
And
cool.
and Omaha is a really good food city. And it's a cool city for the size of what it is, and a lot of people don't realize that. I
Yeah,
also kind of want to keep it that way
right.
because we don't want to be invaded by Californians like Portland was.
Yeah, well, we're going through that here. I don't
Yeah.
mind because I like California and I like Californians, so it doesn't bother me so much. The only bad part of it is that it drives our house values up.
Yes.
So
This
that's
is
the
that's one of the
only,
weird things about Omaha. We have some of the most affordable housing in
yeah.
the country.
See,
And
you
like
didn't say that
I know
because
it's horrible here. It's
there.
cold. It is 1 degree outside.
That's awesome, dude.
My face nearly froze off when I was walking here.
I'm kind of jealous of that. I
That it's
say
one
that.
degree.
I say that, but then if I had to live in it for months on end, it would be like probably not so fun. But
It was kind of weird because when I moved back from Portland, it didn't snow that year, which was like the first time I can ever remember not snowing. And then it didn't snow the next year. And then it just dumped like the third year. And I'm like, I kind of forgot what snow was like.
yeah,
And I forgot what it was like to live in a place where my face freezes.
right. I think I'm at that point too because I've lived here since 2001. And before that, I was in Ohio. So we had winter, obviously. So
Yeah.
I've kind
Oh,
of forgotten what it feels like in, March when you're like, really, dude, snow?
yeah.
It's kind of like that with the heat here. Like it was well over 100 degrees all the way through November.
I remember you saying something about that. Yeah. Of course, you're really far south down there too, aren't
Yeah, yeah,
you?
yeah. Hot. Yeah. Past couple years, I think I turned the air conditioner on back in February. I had it on 2 days last week. Um, I honestly, neither Mike or I like the sun, so I'm really questioning
But
our decision to move here at this point. But it is what it is what it is. So whatever.
I realized after a year of living in Seattle that I actually kind of like the sun because I, you go to Seattle and it's constant water torture. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't really rain; it just drips on you. And I used to tell people I moved to Portland for the weather, which
Yeah.
Portland doesn't suck quite as bad. But there's that skit on Portlandia where the sun comes out, and you see like people in lawn chairs and
Right.
how he's following where the sun is, and
Right.
that actually is not far from the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have the opposite extreme here where they're like, today there were actual clouds. And I'm like, I can take pictures of this because most of the days of the year it's cloudless. So it's just big, huge, bright blue sun. And
Oh
while
yeah,
that sounds beautiful to most people, it's it's very it's isolating. Like Mike used to always describe it, it's like you're always outside without a hat on. It's just like the sun is just glaring at you all the
yes,
time. And it's not quite so bad this time of the year because it's not 100 degrees, but it gets really old.
yes.
Summer we didn't get a monsoon either, so we didn't get any rain. So it was just like, okay, I get it. It's hot enough already. Whatever.
Done. Move
Yeah.
to the next one. Yeah.
I know. I don't know where we should be, but I don't think it's here. But we're but then again, I have a mountain. Superstition Mountain is only a few miles from my house and it's breathtakingly beautiful, so whatever.
Yeah, and that's one thing Nebraska does not have. The scenery is, unless you're really into cows and cornfields, it's
Yeah.
not all that. We
It's
don't have
pretty
any
flat,
oceans. What's that?
pretty flat.
Surprisingly, no. I live in a very not flat part of the state. There's
Okay.
a lot of hills here.
All right.
Not like the Rocky Mountains, but where I grew up was the Sand Hills, and it was called that because it was just flat and sandy.
Okay.
There's nothing out there. and then you run into the Rocky Mountains, rather quickly.
Okay. So you got stuff to look at.
Yeah. There's rivers, streams, lakes, ponds. Nebraska, not for everyone. That was their stupid motto for a while. Everybody hated it.
Oh, so UFOs.
UFOs.
Talk about them. What do you got for me?
I don't know. Ask me questions.
I don't know. I mean, have you seen them? What do you tell me? I need to know.
So have I seen them? Well, like I said, I grew up in Western Nebraska. I grew up out in the area called the Sand Hills, where there is like literally absolutely no light pollution whatsoever. So, I grew up in an area where like the nearest hospital was 60 miles away.
Oh, okay.
So way out there. And it's where my dad, and actually when my dad's family migrated here from Germany, they were the first settlers out there, and everybody just kind of stayed. They never left, really. And so I would see all kinds of weird things. And my dad was kind of and when I say my dad, he was actually my granddad. So, but he raised me, so I always call him.
Sure.
But my dad was actually a kind of this strange mindset. Like I remember one time while we were driving through Arizona or New Mexico or something, and my dad would point over and said, hey, see those mountains or see those mounds over there? He said, that's where they buried giants, and like he would say these like weird, strange things to me like that. But very, I won't say fundamentalist, but he would go to church and remember that, and basically I think it was a way for him to socialize, to him to go to church, but my
Sure.
mom was fucking on brimstone. He was more he was more, hey, I've got an 8-track under the seat of the car of the Beatles, don't tell your mom, let's go fishing, that type of thing. But when I lived out there, and maybe you see this down in Arizona too, but you see things that don't make sense in the conventional science term. And you will see things, lights in the sky. Like I remember one time, one of my best friends and I, we were driving home. We went to the nearest town, which was 60 miles away, to go eat a Pizza Hut, and do the things teenagers do.
Right.
So we were driving home, and we see this light kind of follow us, trying to do this type of thing. And I remember my friend saying, that is strange. I don't think an airplane is supposed to be able to do that.
Right.
And so like, okay, maybe we're just imagining something,
Sure.
or whatever. And light comes down and basically buzzes our car.
Interesting.
And we're kind of like, what was that? So have I seen aliens? I've seen a lot of things like that. And it wasn't just that. You would see that all the time. And I remember another time my dad came out on the porch, and I think this is when I was in school or grad school or something. I was sitting out there and I was having a cigarette. I was out on the porch, and my dad looks up in the sky. I don't smoke anymore, by the way. Smoking's bad for you. It's stupid. But
PSA.
Yeah, glad I quit.
Don't do
Saved
it.
a lot of money quitting.
Yeah.
But we saw so you would see, a satellite in the space station, and the ISS and stuff like that. And of course, we what those were.
Right.
Well, we saw something go overhead that I forget if it went from south to north or north to south. I forget which direction it was. And it wasn't on a straight north to south trajectory or something like that. And so my dad was, into weird electronic stuff, and he had a book of like satellites that would go over or something like that. And so he looked it up and he's like, there's no satellites that go that way. I said, okay. So we went and asked, one of our friends who was actually a college professor who kind of lived in the town. And he's like, well, the only thing I know of is there's occasional military satellites that, we're not supposed to know about.
Sure.
Of course, we see that, that kind of stuff out there all the time too, all that X-Files, military things that we don't ask questions about. Why are they digging a giant hole out here? Okay, whatever. But that's part of living in Nebraska.
That's interesting.
I live next to one of the largest nuclear bases in the world. Like it's literally about 8 miles down the street from me, which is SAC or Offutt. But anyway, I digress. But the professor, who's actually still a friend of mine, says something about, have you ever heard of the Dark Knight? Okay, no. So this is one of those things that until the internet came along, it kind of stayed in the back of my head, and I went and looked up the Dark Knight satellite, and it is fascinating because it is believed what Nikola Tesla used to say, that he was getting inspiration and being talked to from the Dark Knight satellite, which is really bizarre. So
what the world?
Y'all have to look it up and do some research on your own with it. But there is allegedly a satellite that flies, and I believe it's south to north over the Earth. That's a Dark Knight satellite that there's actually been pictures of. The ISS has seen it. They've taken pictures of it. Some things have been scrubbed about it, but no one knows where it is. No one knows why it's there. It wasn't made on Earth. It was here long before we ever had satellites in orbit. So go figure.
That's
yeah. And so when you see things like that, they're like, okay, we have an Earth that's X number of years old.
Sure.
There's trillions of planets in the solar system, or in the solar system, in the universe, just in our galaxy.
Right.
And at one time, Copernicus was, I think it was Copernicus, said, hey, everything doesn't revolve around the Earth. The Earth is in the center of everything. And science has been telling us this, that we're not the center of the universe forever and ever and ever. So to think that we're the only intelligent beings here is kind of foolhardy. I mean,
it's illogical.
Yeah, it's completely illogical. So now there's some other things, I know a lot of people who claim to believe in aliens or seeking attention or trying to sell their book or, this, that, or the other. But logic just tells me that there has to be other life in the universe.
Sure.
There has to be something else. Whether it's intelligent or not, I don't know. Probably. If they can send a spaceship here, they're obviously more intelligent than us.
Right.
If they can send a spaceship here.
Anyway.
What's that?
Farther along anyway.
Yeah, at least farther along. I mean, I don't think that we could do that with combustion engine. So, or rocket fuel.
Right.
At least we haven't been able to yet. So it just seems logical that there is something else out there, that there are probably planets and solar systems elsewhere in the universe that are older than ours. Yeah. And that there probably is intelligent life.
Yeah. So I know from watching my friends or listening to my friend's podcast, Strange Familiars, he says, not just him, but people say that there's sort of a connection between those lights and Bigfoot. So that's my next question. Have you seen, do you have any Bigfoot encounters or anything?
Bigfoot? No. I've never seen Bigfoot. Then again, I grew up in a place where there was lynxes, and I never saw lynx, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
But I used to joke when I lived up in the Pacific Northwest, I used to go out to like Cannon Beach and Lincoln City and stuff out there. And you have to go through some really trippy areas to get back into like civilization. And I used to always, and it's always foggy. It is always foggy out there. And I was always like, oh man, I hope I don't hit a Bigfoot. And I was only half kidding, because if Bigfoot does exist, I can see that he would probably live out there.
Right, like he would be there. Did you ever see any strange lights or anything while you were in the woods there?
Actually, yeah. Mostly when you look off into, so I used to every like Thanksgiving or Christmas, I'd rent a beach house out there. And all you have to pretty much do is look out over the ocean and you'll see all kinds of weird stuff, like go into the water and then come back up all the time.
Dang.
Um, it's, I even saw those in California, come to think of it, some places out there. But I think it was easier to see out in the Pacific Northwest. But as far as anything, I do take that back. I was, how should I say this, partaking of something which is legal in Portland, which is not in the rest of the country, which is why I kind of doubted this. But I was with a really close friend of mine who was not. I was standing outside smoking something, and my friend, who does not believe in aliens whatsoever and always thought I was crazy, pointed up in the sky and he's like, "What are those three things that are moving?" And so I looked up, and sure enough, there's three lights up in the sky, fairly close to us too. And one of them kind of zigzags. And I'm like, "Oh, it's probably those Chinese lanterns, that people."
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I don't think so. I've been watching them longer than you have. And they blinked out and then came back and then blinked out again. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that was. So
wow.
I really saw lights up there. But a lot of people say that they see a lot of strange phenomena out there. Of course, I also think that they put LSD in the drink.
Are you kidding or are you serious?
If you've ever been to Portland, you gotta wonder.
Okay. So that's interesting. I have sadly never seen anything weird in the sky that was not later explained. I say sadly, but I'm also sort of glad about it because aliens scare me.
Okay.
Because they're so unknown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not from here. So I feel like my ability to reason with them, should I be captured, is about this much. Whereas, if I got captured by a vampire, I could probably reasonably make some sort of case to not kill me or
at least give you eternal life.
Yeah, hook me up, brother,
Right.
But,
I kind of figure it this way, though. If they have the ability to travel 6 billion light years and get here, they're probably not going to kill us because they probably could have already.
That is a valid point. And if they have been here, like a lot of ancient alien theorists would suggest, or whatever, they seem to
aliens theorists say yes.
Yeah, right. They seem to be trying to help us, right?
I would think for the most part, or at least not hinder us.
Right.
Yeah.
And at least observing, maybe.
I've always had this theory about people when they talk about alien abductions and stuff, because my theory on this is actually, okay, so I had a friend who was a Hindu. He was from India. Actually, he was from New Jersey, but 3 generations ago his family was. But he would always say, he always had this tagline, this phrase that said, if I was a fish and I got caught and thrown back in, when I tell my friends I was abducted by aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of made me think, and I'm like, okay, so if aliens are here, I think that the alien abduction phenomena, I think most of it is made up, quite honestly. But I think that some people maybe have been abducted by aliens, but I think it's kind of a situation where, say you're driving along on a country road in the middle of nowhere, and you're kind of in the backwater and you accidentally hit a dog. Sure. And you're a good person. What do? You try to help the dog.
Sure.
Right? And so, let's talk about anal probes for a second. How would you take the dog's temperature? Maybe that's what the anal probes are. And I think that that's probably what's happening if these alien abductions occur, is that, they, Beeble Bob, the Zorkon or whatever, took a wrong turn, ends up in Earth, accidentally crashes or hits someone's car or blinds them or whatever. And so they're trying to check to see if you're okay. And I think mostly, if anything, they think of us as we think of dogs or cats or
Sure. Yeah.
wildlife or something like that. Going back to the Bigfoot idea, though, I kind of do wonder because I've read a lot about those ancient alien theorists, and how they've changed our genetics and so on and so forth. Not 1,000% sure I believe in that, but if that were the case, I think it'd be kind of interesting that maybe Bigfoot is actually one of the Neanderthals, or not Neanderthals, but one of the pro-humans, maybe there was some of them that said, screw this.
Like Anthropithecus or whatever.
Yeah. And I don't, I have a degree in like biology, but I don't remember what those are called.
Yeah, that's funny. We watch a lot of Ancient Aliens in this household and a lot of all of those shows. So yeah, that's a major area of interest for us. Anything aliens. Mike is hugely into like speculative archaeology and sort of the unknown history that we go back way, 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 way farther than common knowledge and teach actually. So we watch a lot of that stuff. Mike reads a lot of books, and Graham Hancock is one of his favorite authors. So, I love anything like creepy, spooky. It's fascinating to me because we don't know what it is, but you can sit and talk about it and theorize, and anybody's opinion is valid because we don't know.
Yeah, you can't prove it right or wrong, And well, and going back to my grandfather, my dad, he always said those kind of weird things. My dad would always say that there was a time before time.
Sure.
And he would say that there was a history before history.
Yeah.
And and he would say, when Noah's flood wiped everything out and blah 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 blah. And these are things that he said to me when I was a kid, and I always took them as factual because you listen to your grandparents or whatever. But and then I remember actually saying something in a class, I think in high school, and being laughed at, about the people before people or the pre-Adamites or something like that.
Right.
And then I realized, these are things I'm not supposed to talk about because everybody will think you're crazy or weird.
Right.
And and then people have started to speak in those manner, about those things.
Yeah.
And explore them, like, why not? Maybe the pyramids were built by humans before.
Right. And just taking over.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know who built Teotihuacan. They don't even know how old it is.
Right. So and you can't tell.
Long before the Aztecs and the Mayans, and it's been there forever. So who knows who built that? And what is it, Göbekli Tepe or whatever? And
Göbekli Tepe, yeah. And is that in Lebanon? That's where the
something like that.
I'm thinking Baalbek. Baalbek is where the Jupiter temple is, I believe. But
all this information.
Yeah, but all these unanswered things, that like.
I love it.
Well, I've heard too, like that the pyramids were actually a power station.
Yeah.
Ray, you probably heard that theory too, where it vibrated and because it pointed to Sirius or something like that. And I'm like, that makes a lot more sense than it being a tomb for a king that wasn't really known.
Right.
Even at the time. And, so I think though that where this becomes dangerous is when you have like the alt-right shaman dude.
Yeah, he's from here, by the way.
Yes.
Right up the road.
Yeah. And I won't grace the world with his name, but we all know who we're talking about.
Sure.
But what's really weird is I started listening to some of the speeches and stuff, and he's one of the people who believes, and I'm sure that you've heard of this too, the secret space program. Are you familiar with this?
Probably. Yeah, I'm sure I've probably heard some of this.
Okay. So this is where the crazy comes in, and here's what I don't like is because like this alien research kind of thing has kind of been taken over by some alt-right, people who are conspiracists who say, Trump's going to save the world and tell us all about the aliens.
Right.
So, and author David Wilcock is one of the people promoting this and so on and so forth. But what it was is a computer systems analyst, Gary McKinnon, and I want to say it was in the early 2000s, I forget exactly what this was, allegedly hacked the Pentagon, and he found, allegedly, proof that there was an off-Earth space station. Okay, so he claims that he found something that there were anti-terrestrial or non-terrestrial soldiers who worked for the U.S. government in the U.S. space station or USSS or something. So the weird thing is, though, is that Gary McKinnon actually went to jail for quite some time, for about 20 years, if I remember right. So he actually did do something. He did hack into the Pentagon. That can be proven, so on. So whether he found what he said he did, no one can say.
Right.
But soon after that happened, there started to be a whole bunch of people who came out and said, well, I was part of the Space Force. Right. And what it is and they all have the same story. They all say that they were abducted when they were about 8 or 9 years old, indoctrinated into the Space Force when they were 16 or 17, that they all have ties, family ties to the military or something, back from World War II, or, their grandparents had worked with some secret something or other, blah, blah, blah. And that, the family had given them to, be in the space program. And then they were sent up to Mars, did their training, went out to the Kuiper Belt, did this, that, and the other, and then came back to Earth and were regressed, and they were 15 minutes, later, within what they were, they only aged 15 minutes or something, right?
Okay.
And they were all put back in their beds. And I have heard 3 or 4 of these people who said the exact same thing, and, QAnon dude is one of them. He said the exact same story. And I'm like, where have I heard this before? Well, he's actually caught the X-Files, right? Almost verbatim.
How did I know that? That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I feel like what ends up happening with a lot of these conspiracy theories is there's like 1% truth to it. And that's enough to give it validity to some people who want to believe it.
Right.
Because
right.
if there's even 1% of truth, then, well, it must be true then.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I can tell you a story from my own experience on that too. On 9/11, the United States government said that no planes whatsoever left the United States, that all the planes in the United States were grounded. I happen to live in San Antonio, Texas, and I literally lived across the street from the airport at that point. And I saw three airplanes leave after all the planes had been grounded. Okay. So the United States government said for years and years and years and years, in fact, it wasn't until 2018 that I found out what this was. Osama bin Laden had a brother and members of the Saudi bin Laden family who lived in San Antonio, who were actually diplomat and had diplomatic immunity. They loaded them up on a plane. And of course, the family members didn't have anything to do with bin Laden. They'd actually disowned them. But these, Saudi bin Laden's a huge, giant, they build roads and, their engineering and architecture. So in order to protect them, they put the Saudi bin Laden family onto 3 different airplanes. And those were the planes I saw.
Interesting.
Well, so, and this has been declassified since then, and I saw some other weird things, and I actually don't know what I can talk about, but I saw some other weird things around 9/11 that I saw with my own eyes, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're not telling the full story here. The government is lying about these things because I know this for a fact, because I saw this with my own eyes, and I know what I saw.
Right.
So, yes, of course our government lies to us sometimes.
It kind of on inside cards, when it comes to protection and
sure. And I think about 90% of the alien spacecrafts that we've seen were either U-2 spy planes or the SR-71 or
Right.
the
Experiment.
yeah. So, and I think that's what Area 51 was. What a perfect way to disguise something. I don't even think the government put that out. I think people said, "Oh, Area 51 has aliens," and so the government just kind of went with it because,
Sure.
yeah,
They were really in Dayton, Ohio. At least they were.
yeah, Wright Patterson, yeah,
We all know, right?
yeah.
I'm sure
I
they're
mean,
long
everybody.
there. Yeah.
But and the government was testing secret aircraft. There's allegedly an Aurora aircraft that they were testing. We know now that they were testing stuff out of Area 51, that they were flying SR-51s out of there. So, when you have lies like that, people are going to take that and extrapolate it, to the fullest extent.
Sure.
And I think that that's where the danger of these things come in, because then you have, how should I say this? You get someone like Trump who comes in and exploits those truths that are false.
Right. Yeah.
And becomes a false messiah on those type of things.
Right.
And not just Trump, but you have many, many, many other people,
Sure.
like QAnon Jesus and, whatever.
Yeah.
So the thing is if there is aliens, why aren't they telling us about it?
Because maybe, another theory is that they are here and they're among us and we don't even know. It could be your neighbor, it could be whoever,
And people thought I was joking when I said this, but I kind of think David Bowie was.
I have other friends who say the same thing, like he could not possibly be human.
No.
Yeah. I know there are those people that just seem extra.
Right.
Yeah.
Prince might have been one too.
I don't know. I don't dare speculate in that regard, but I don't know. I think it's fun to entertain that the possibility of all these things, Bigfoot, aliens, vampires, whatever.
Do you believe vampires exist?
I want to believe that they exist. I think that there has to be some truth to it because and this rings true of anything to me, anything that goes across cultures all over the world that are unconnected, there has to be some kernel of truth to it.
Right.
What it is, I don't know. I would love to think that there are vampires roaming the earth. Whether or not they are, I don't know. I almost just said call me if you are, but then I think no, probably best not to get involved if they are. But it's funny because a couple of weeks ago I was out walking one night and it just like out of nowhere I'm like, what would I do if one of my characters just suddenly plopped down beside me, like, hey, what would your reaction to be really truly being confronted by the reality of this thing that you thought was a story?
Right. Yeah.
And would they be, are there different types? Are they, are they ones, are they just pure, like, sort of demon-y kind of things? Or are they just like us? Or, I don't know. I want to find out, but then yet I don't want to find out, obviously, because that could be a dangerous prospect. I know one thing. I don't believe that people who go around saying I'm a vampire because they drink blood, they're not vampires. There are people that drink. That's just me. I'll probably get some hate for that. You do.
Yeah. I can hear your email going off now.
Like, live your life. I'm not begrudging you your lifestyle choices, but my definition of a vampire is supernatural. It's not just some person who cuts their friend and drinks their blood. That's just, call me whatever.
What about werewolves then? Or all kinds of cryptids?
Oh, because there's lots of tales all over the world, folklore about shapeshifters, and is it possible? I think it's possible. I I can't say obviously one way or the other. I want to believe that all this stuff is real. Like that's like like elves and fairies and like I want all of this stuff to be real. I want the world to be magical. But you know what it looks like, what it is, I don't know.
And
What
and that's,
do you think?
it's kind of interesting because like when I was younger, I went down to New Mexico and Arizona, down to the Four Corners area.
Hmm.
Actually quite a bit north of you there.
Yeah.
But I saw weird stuff that I can't explain even to this day.
Right.
You know, and the Navajos believe in the shapeshifters.
Skinwalkers.
Yeah, the skinwalkers. I almost call them Belicani, but I think that's what they call white people. But yeah, you know, and they also believe in aliens, you know, and it's not one of those, oh, I believe in aliens type thing. It's like, oh yeah, of course, you know, it's like my dog. Yeah, yeah, they've been visiting us for thousands of years. They give us corn, you know, that type of thing. But you know, I saw weird things down there that might have been, you know, dehydration. But you know, I swear I saw a shapeshifter, and I, truth be told, I don't really believe in werewolves or vampires, but I saw some things down there that I can't explain. I don't know what they were. You know, I saw an animal that I could have sworn was a fox turn and fly off. You know, while I was on a hike one time. I don't know if it's a shapeshifter. You know, just things like that. So I think that they're, you know, as far as cryptids go too, there might be something to that. Just because we haven't seen them doesn't mean they don't exist. You know, like I said about the links. I know that there are links in the world. I just have never seen them.
Right.
You know? So.
Well, and even with Bigfoot, they're always like, well, we would have found a body already. Well, stuff decomposes super fast. Like,
Yeah.
I heard the, you know, the comparison, like, well, you don't usually find bear carcasses in the woods either. You know, they're just
things eat it, whatever, you know. Well, and if they are slightly human, or if they are human or humanoid, or you know, whatever, they're gonna bury their dead. You know, they're not gonna leave it out there.
Right. True too. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, I did one time run into a guy who was verified schizophrenic, who made jewelry. He was up in St. Helens, Mount St. Helens, up along the Washington Oregon border, and he claimed he fed Bigfoot and they took care of him. And the way he talked about him, and I mean, people would say that this guy would sometimes disappear for a couple days at a time and then come back and be well fed, you know. But he said that the Bigfoot would take care of him. There was a family of them out there. And if they're Bigfoot anywhere, they're probably out by Mount St. Helens in Washington.
Right.
Because they're trying to stay the hell away.
It's like your first instinct is to go, well, that's just crazy. But
right.
It's, I don't know that person. I don't experience what they experience, you know?
Right.
I don't.
Well, when you go back to the grain of truth thing, and the guy was schizophrenic. You can tell this when you talk to him. But he wasn't all out there.
Right.
You know, I mean, like he knew that he was in the bar and that he was smoking a cigarette and that he was drinking a beer, you know, that type of thing. So something had to be happening that he would disappear for 2 or 3 days. And, you know, people said, we don't know enough about it. We wanted to put a tracker on him. You know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
No, who knows?
Yeah.
Cryptids may exist. Bigfoot may exist. Sure. Aliens probably exist.
Well, people see stuff. I mean, I've experienced weird stuff, just nothing to do with UFOs or anything like that. Yeah. But I've experienced enough weird stuff to know that there's more to things than just what's obvious on the surface, you know.
Right.
There's obviously more going on. I mean, right.
Well, and then there's other things too, because like I said, I live in Omaha. I've seen the stealth fighter fly over Omaha because we have one of the largest Air Force bases in the world now, right? So before the stealth fighter was known, or, you know,
yeah,
whatever, it would fly over the city every now and then. And I remember seeing it one time before, you know, it was known that this existed. And it, for all intents and purposes, if you saw it, you never heard of the stealth fighter, you would think it was an alien spaceship.
100%. Yeah, it looks like
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like it shifts shapes when it's in the air, especially when it banks and it turns. And so much so that when this happened, there were accidents on the interstate.
I'm sure. Probably people, a lot of people probably called that in too. Like there's a UFO.
Absolutely. That absolutely happened. You know, and so the police were like, you know, and probably the base knew what was happening. They had probably warned the police, you know, and so the police say, oh, you know, they blew it off or whatever, you know, and this is, you know, like 95 or before that, you know. And then when I see a stealth fighter, you know, 25 years later, I'm like, oh, of course, that's what I saw, right. You know, and I kind of feel stupid about it. But, right. You know, it's like, okay, well, what's your mind supposed to make of these things when you see them?
Right. Right. So, yeah, you come up with some rationalization just so you can sleep at night.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And make sure you're not crazy.
Right. Yeah. I know Mike is always bummed out because we moved here after the Phoenix Lights happened. That's like, you know, that's all up in his wheelhouse there. He loves UFOs and all that kind of stuff. And so he's always like depressed that we missed out on seeing the Phoenix Lights. But
trust me, there is enough weird stuff that goes on out there. If you look for it, that's the other thing. My dad always told me that people don't see UFOs because they don't look up at the sky.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you're just in your house all the time.
Yeah, and you know, and then that would, you know, and like I said, I noticed these things when I lived out there because, you know, one, my dad always told me to look up, you know, for one thing, but also because, you know, there's no light pollution. There's nothing else to look at.
Yeah.
And when you're driving home at night, you know, and you look up in the sky and you're like, holy crap, that really doesn't make sense that those lights are zigzagging across.
Right. You know?
And I think a lot of people just need to recognize it and notice it.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, I when I lived out, when I would go out to the coast, I would see the lights all the time out over the ocean. People didn't notice it because they didn't look out over the ocean. They weren't looking for it, or, you know, they didn't try to see it.
So when you saw the lights in Nebraska, were they colored? Were they white? What did they look like? Were they like balls of light?
Yeah, they were like balls of light. They would be, I'm thinking of the specific time where it kind of buzzed the car. It was a white, but it kind of turned to a yellow. And this is not something, it would have been physically impossible where I was for something to bounce off the road or anything like that, because there's literally nothing out there. It's empty. So it absolutely could not have been an optical illusion. It could have been something bouncing off the clouds.
No reflection, nothing like that.
But they were a yellow, white, and it would change size. So it was kind of, so it would, and my friend and I had thought that it was because it was going, what's it called, parallax? When it goes further away and it looks smaller and then.
Yeah.
So that's what we thought it was, but then it, like, kind of hard to describe, it just expanded really large in front of us.
How weird.
And then kind of buzzed the car enough so that I was driving and I almost drove off the road because I thought, you know, I don't know. In my mind, what it was that sometimes the military would do these weird things where they would, because we were between two Air Force bases, they would fly from Omaha to Denver. And so sometimes the pilots would get bored and, you know,
mess with people.
Around. Yeah. So we actually had thought it was Air Force pilots, you know, buzzing our car, but we didn't hear anything. Right? So there was no sound. It looked like our car was getting buzzed, and like I almost drove off the road.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of like, well, that was weird.
So 2 questions. One, so it couldn't have been like a spotlight from like a plane or something like that.
Not from a plane or anything like that. Well, I wouldn't say it was impossible because people might have been hunting out in the fields and stuff, but we're talking 20 miles from nowhere.
Right.
We're talking out in the middle of nowhere, and
Right.
probably, cattle pastures all around. I don't even think there was cows out there.
Well, and to be able to keep up with your car too, if you're
Yeah, and that was the other weird thing. So no, I don't think it was a spotlight. I don't think it could have been a spotlight because it didn't. I mean, it didn't look like a spotlight.
right. And so my other question, or I have two more questions. Was there any sound associated with it?
None, nothing at all.
Okay. And the third question was, did it feel like light, or did it feel like light emanating from a physical object?
Yes. I don't know how to describe it. It felt like
A ball?
yeah, but it felt like I guess the closest thing that I could even think to describing it would be that it was almost like a ball lightning.
Okay.
And that's what it felt like, is that it was like a ball lightning, or well, I'd never heard that term at that point in time.
Sure.
If anything, it might have been that.
Okay.
But that's kind of what it was like, is that it was itself emanating light.
Interesting.
And then it buzzed the car and then just went up so fast that it disappeared.
That's
I won't say it didn't blink out, it just zoomed.
Okay, so here's a crazy question for you. Could it have been like an entity? Like I mean, this is gonna sound so dumb, but like a fairy, or like, something like that. A ghost, you know.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. So yeah, it definitely could have been.
Fascinating.
And I'm not even 100% sure ball lightning isn't an entity. When I've heard about that.
Yeah, I don't know much about that, but that's interesting.
I read a fascinating book by Lu Xian, or Xian Lu. Yeah, which way his name is pronounced in English, but he wrote it. It was on Obama's books you must read list, called The Three Body Problem, and the sequel to that was called Ball Lightning. It's absolutely fascinating. I would highly recommend it.
Cool. That's cool. So, yeah, so there's stories about people being in the woods and having balls of light getting near, going away, moving through disappearing, coming back, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, it is. And it's, and it seemed to have an intelligence, like it was intentionally screwing with us for some reason.
Well, that's what these people say too, like either it's guiding you or leading you somewhere or checking you out, or or
messing with you. Because like I said, what we thought it was is our rational minds, my buddy and I, we were thinking that it was Air Force pilots, and sometimes they would do, there was a reservoir kind of near where we were, and sometimes they would do practice, like runs to like not really bombing runs, but how they would dive or whatever, because they would, like I said, they would get bored.
Right.
And also we were so far out in the middle of nowhere that they could actually sonic boom there and not get
hurt anybody.
not freak out anybody. So we'd hear that a lot too. So we knew there was Air Force all over the place. So that's what we thought it was. We thought it was just some Air Force pilot board, but normally they would have more than one of them. So and then we were kind of joking, maybe it was one of those weird experimental planes or something, that the Air Force has. We didn't know what it was.
So around this time when this happened, did anything strange happen elsewhere in your life? Like either one of you, did you experience any other weirdness at all? Or was there anything like dramatic going on in your life or anything like that?
Well, I was like 17, growing up in Nebraska. So of course there was like drama, but nothing. You know, nothing non-normal drama. No, I mean, it wasn't like, you know, did it seem like it was an angel visiting me or anything like that? No, it just seemed like, you know, my buddy and I went for pizza on a Saturday night, and you know, weird crap happened when we came home. You know, and you know, and I say this one incident, but you know, this happened like several times where you'd see lights in the sky and things like that out there. You know, it was just when you kept your eyes open to it, it would happen. You know, and there was another time where, and I'm pretty sure that this actually was a military plane that flew over, but I had something fly over me. Radio went out. You know, your typical, you normally hear your UFO, you know, that the radio goes out or something like that.
Battery dies.
Yeah. Well, guess what? The U.S. military has things that they can block radio signals.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're out there, they probably tested those things every now and then. You know, where there was not a large population of people. But yeah, I was driving one time and I had my you know, radio go out in the middle of nowhere. You know, and lights didn't go out or anything like that, but you know, I heard a plane overhead. You know, so I'm pretty sure it was a jet. You know?
Yeah.
But other times there was weird lights that you would see that you wouldn't be able to, you know, you would hear things out there. Actually, a lot of times you would hear nothing, which was even scarier because it was like, you know, and I'm sure if you go about 30 miles outside of where you live, you know, you can see that where there's no light pollution, where you don't hear anything, there's no signs of life anywhere. That's almost spookier.
I agree. Yeah, I know. I like I've gotten so used to having sound that, for instance, where I grew up in Ohio, there was a cornfield between my house and the turnpike. And so the constant sound of the turnpike I had my entire life. So even though it was relatively quiet, there was this buzz of a turnpike. So when Mike and I first moved to the apartment that we got, it was so quiet and it was so disturbing to me. Like I don't like dead quiet, but here there's always noise here. So I know that if I did move out to the middle of nowhere, I would probably be a paranoid spaz. Like I joke about this, but I'm dead serious about it. I'm like scared of killers. I know it's dumb. I bring this up all the time, but just being out isolated someplace where there's no help if something goes down, I'm scared of people more than I am anything else, you know, because people are sick. But like I said, I feel like I could reason probably with a vampire easier than I could murderous killer. But I don't know. My gut instinct is that I want to live out like that. But then realistically, I'm like, I would probably be like, I would need gigantic dogs and security systems, and like it would have to be like a Fort Knox setup or something for me not to be scared all the time.
Well, it's kind of funny because my dad where we lived, it basically was Fort Knox, because unless you knew where to find where we were, you wouldn't know where we were, that type of thing. Kind of hidden in plain sight. And it's kind of like years and years later, you know, when things like, you know, what was that prepper show that used to be on? I forget what it was, on the History Channel or something.
Doomsday Preppers or something like that.
Something like that. But I was like, that's what my dad was. Because we canned our own food. Like God's honest truth, I didn't know you could buy green beans until I was like 20.
That's funny.
You know, we grew our own food out there. You know, we lived so far out in the middle of nowhere that we basically we had well water, you know, and that type of thing. And you know, it was like, oh, okay. my dad was a little weird. I didn't realize that. I thought everybody grew up like that.
Yeah, I don't think that that's particularly weird. I find it interesting that he would tell you stuff like that's where they buried the giants. That's cool to me.
and I still have like things that are in the back of my head that he told me, just weird things like that. And I think that that's where my fascination with aliens comes from. And I think that
Yeah,
that's where
sure.
my fascination for things, because he would tell me things like, the first people who lived here are, okay, so I remember that there was a Mormon colony, and they had a cross up on one of the hills near where I live,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually had three crosses. And my dad was always like, the Mormons believed in the time before time, and the time before the natives were here. And, he would tell me things like that, or, of these different people who were here, before, who lived here before and who are gone now, or like the Anasazi or things like that,
Right.
they came and were taken away. And he would say these weird things to me, like you wouldn't expect a religious man to say these.
Right.
And it was also one of those things that like he would tell me kind of in secret too, like, don't tell your mom that we talked about
Yeah.
the mound builders or something like that.
Right.
And I'm thankful to him. He's passed on now, but I'm thankful to him that he always said those things to me, because it makes me think of the world maybe a little bit differently than I would have
Yeah.
otherwise.
Of course. Yeah.
And and I think it makes things at least more fun.
Of course. I
You know,
agree. Yeah. Completely. Some people and people can think however they want to think. People should be who they are. Some people believe in absolutes. Everything's black and white. Yes, no. What they see is what they get. There's nothing deeper to it. And other people go far the other way,
right?
where every single thing is true.
As it seems.
Yeah. And I'm sort of in the middle of there, where I believe some of it, but I try to look for the rational explanation first. And if I don't have a rational explanation for it, then I'm like, okay, well, then that's possible, right? So, I don't know. I think it makes life more interesting to me to think that there's possibilities that we don't see with our eyes. Just like I posted an article yesterday, I think.
The dream.
The dream thing, yeah, that
Yeah.
physicists are I mean, in my way of thinking, if a physicist thinks that it's possible, who am
Right.
I, an uneducated oaf, to tell him he's wrong, that it's not possible,
Right.
right? And
Well,
I mean,
I've seen so many things about that. Where have you ever read Valis by Philip K. Dick?
no.
Valis is fascinating because it actually talks about that idea that not just in dreams, but like our whole lives, we're in a holographic universe.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because that idea is actually mathematically probable.
Right.
And like Elon Musk has even talked about it.
Right.
And the weird thing is, though, is I'm like, okay, so if we're in a giant Sim City, why have I seen an alien spaceship?
Yeah.
Is it a glitch in the Matrix? And
Well,
and those are fascinating things to think about. I mean, I don't know if I believe in that or not, but it sure is a fun mental exercise.
sure.
It also kind of freaks me out, though.
Yeah, I don't want that to be true. And also, if it is true, fucking give me a better life, dude. Hook me up. What the hell?
Why am I not rich?
Why am I this? I don't
Right. What?
fix my programming already. Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a virus going on.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding, but I don't know. I think that's super fascinating. But even just like um, my friend Timothy, who has his podcast Strange Familiars, has a guest that comes on, Brother Richard, and one of the things that he said, and we figured out last week when I was talking to him that it was him that said this, was obviously he's a priest, so, or, so he believes in the Bible and whatever. But like he was saying, if your brain can conceive of something, God has already created that thing, or you wouldn't be able to conceive it. Right? And that's an interesting thing to me, because that literally means any possible thing that you can think up exists somewhere.
So that means unicorns are real.
Sure. Well, I think unicorns actually were real. I don't know. They had to have existed at some point, but that's not
enough. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, if it's not possible, how could your brain come up with it? Right?
I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who was actually, it was a coworker who was super religious one time. And he said, "So you believe in extraterrestrials?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I do." I said, "So do you?" He's like, "No, I don't. I don't believe in that crap." And I said, "You believe in God?" "Well, yeah, of course I do." "Is God a terrestrial being?" You believe in angels?" "Yeah, but those are extraterrestrials."
Yeah.
Therefore, believe in extraterrestrials.
I am actually a religious person. I don't want to say I'm a religious person, because that has connotations to it.
Right.
But I am a Christian.
Yeah.
That's my path in life. And that doesn't deter me from believing in all things are possible. Like,
right.
if anything, it makes it seem more possible to me.
Right.
Just like people have this conflict between science and religion. And to me, it was always, religion is the poetic way of explaining the science,
right.
and vice versa. You know what I mean? Right. So to me, there is no conflict between the two things. But I know I'm a weirdo, so.
Well, I had a debate with the same religious guy too, and he said, God made the earth in 7 days, and I said, well, yeah, okay, but it doesn't say that there were 7 consecutive days.
Well, and what is 7 days to an infinite being?
Yeah, but here was my argument. I said, Book of Genesis doesn't say, Monday God created this, Tuesday he created this. I said it doesn't say it's 7 consecutive days. I said I have no problem believing that the whole universe was probably created at 7 different time periods.
Sure.
The animals were created, and if you believe in the ancient alien theory, it definitely says that, because there was interventions by whatever extraterrestrial beings came in.
Right.
But okay, if it was created in 7 days, what if the Earth was created, and then 3,000 years later, on another day,
sure,
biological creatures were created, and then we let the evolution happen, and then on the 3rd day, man was created, that type of thing. Which actually kind of goes along with what one of my ministers actually told me when I was a kid, that this is the way that the earth is. If you look at the Bible, and the creation story, it actually follows what happened with evolution.
Sure.
Because, you had to have the earth before you had,
beings on it.
Yeah, anything on it.
Yeah.
And you had to have the water before you could have, whatever. And so, people were probably the last thing to be created. So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't conflict for me personally, but whatever. I think people get so hung. It's the black and white.
Right.
And people have to have an answer for everything. And some things are just unanswerable. Like, you can't have for it. And even in, in the Bible, it says, who knows the mind of God?
Yeah.
So like you said, what is 7 days, or consecutive days, or.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know, and we won't know.
God could have came down 7 different times. Well, actually 6, because I think on the 7th day he just played golf or something, right?
Yeah, he rested.
But he could have came down 6 different days and said, "Okay, let's change this."
Sure.
Whatever. And even the ancient alien theory, if God is that, if Yahweh of the Old Testament or something was a physical being, and that's what most Christians are most horrified about with the ancient alien theory when you dig down into it.
Yeah.
Is God being an actual physical being, like flesh and blood being, Yahweh, that in the Old Testament was an actual person. I won't say person, but whatever.
Right.
People are horrified when you say that, because they're like, well, no, it has to be a spirit. I was like, well, can a spirit be a physical being? Can a spirit be a ball of light? Maybe going back to those, orbs that I saw, maybe that was spirit beings. Maybe that was angels. I don't know what it was.
Right. Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, that's the thing that's interesting. Like, maybe those lights held you up long enough to avoid an accident down the road, or
Exactly.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Maybe because you were focused on that, you weren't maybe driving as fast, and maybe a deer would have ran out in front of you, or
Exactly. And God's honest truth, I have had an incident like that. When I worked in the record store, when I was hawking your records, I think I went down to see Ricky or someone. Anyway, we went down to Kansas City, and this is a typical voyage that we would always have to take. We would always go down to Lawrence, Kansas, and see bands, because Lawrence was a cool place.
that's a great. I have been to Lawrence, Kansas.
I think I've seen you play there, haven't you? You played there.
The Granada.
Yes, Granada. Yeah, the Granada. It's a great venue. At least it was back in the 90s. I haven't been there in a long time. But when we lived in Omaha, all the cool bands would go down to the Granada, right? Because that's a college town and so on and so forth. And we'd have to drive all the way down there. Well, it's 3+ hours. And the only way to get to Lawrence, Kansas from here is kind of on a empty highway. So everybody would kind of convoy down there, and then we'd all come back at like 2 a.m, and always listen to Art Bell, that type of thing.
Yes.
And well, one time we decided that we weren't going to do that. We were going to go, and I don't know why we did this, but we went to Kansas City. We went down to Lawrence. We went to Kansas City. We stayed overnight, and pool our money together. And I don't remember why this was, but I was driving back, and my buddy kept going, I want to go to Black Eyed Pea. We're like, shut up, Mark, And so we're driving along. He's like, there's a Black Eyed Pea up there. I want to go to Black Eyed Pea. And we're like, shut up, Mark. And I got so mad at him that we see a Black Eyed Pea, and I pull over. And we're like, here's your damn Black Eyed Pea. And literally, as we were doing that, we're all pissed at Mark, and we hear an accident. And not only do we hear an accident, but we can see it, because we pulled off on the side of the road, and Black Eyed Peas over here. And we're seeing like a 30-car pileup. And there was actually one of the Kansas City Chiefs, one of their like cornerback or something, got killed in this accident. Oh, wow. And we were like, oh, that is weird. Because like the smoke from the car fires and stuff is like going over a car. And we're all like, we hate you, Mark, but thanks for being a whiny little bitch.
What is that? A chain there? Chain restaurant there?
Black Eyed, it's not in Nebraska. It's like a southern thing. So that's why he wanted to go to it, because it was like it was a southern thing, and I think the furthest north they have is in Kansas City or something.
That's funny.
He wanted to go to one because he'd never been to one. And he was, he's that guy who always wants to go to the cheap dive diners and things like that. And it's the one who listens to, Spice Girls on the radio when you go on a road trip with them, And
that's funny.
I have plenty of them.
That's cool though.
But yeah, and it was the weirdest thing, because I did it out of anger. And we were all so mad at him until we realized that we would have been dead, and we would have died. We saw the car that was in front of us that had passed us, get crushed.
Wow.
And that is like one of the most horrifying, weird, surreal things that have ever happened.
No kidding.
So,
yeah.
Whenever I have a flat tire or something, I always kind of think of that. And I
do too. Yeah.
Like,
I try to remember that. Like sometimes if I'm, stuck in traffic or something, I'm like, who knows? Maybe this right here is keeping me from an accident farther down the road, or
right.
It's hard to remember that stuff when you're in the middle of trying to get somewhere and you're irritated. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, they say everything happens for a reason. If that's true, then even bad stuff like, a flat tire or whatever serves a purpose somewhere that you may never know.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I've had plenty of things that were horrible that have happened to me at the time that turned out to be the best thing ever.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, relationship that ended where I moved someplace else to get away from the ex or whatever, and then
Right.
oh, okay, now I'm in my dream job, or something like that. Things that seemed really bad at the time when they happen sometimes aren't all that bad.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's very true. They always say like when one door closes, another opens, and uh, certainly when we moved here, we were both working for a music and film distributor in Ohio. We loved that job. We had no intentions of leaving that job. Would have stayed. Would have still been there. But that's when people stopped buying CDs because they were downloading everything for free on the internet. And one day we went into work and they let go of 50% of the staff, and Mike and I lost our jobs on the same day.
Yeah.
And on our drive home, we're like, all right, it's time. Let's just move. And we literally got home from work that day and started packing our stuff and making plans to move out here. And, your life takes a completely different course. Things completely changed for us out here. So what seemed like a pretty devastating thing at the time ended up being a good thing,
Right.
on the line, because maybe if we were still there, we never would have had Dirk, or our whole life could have been completely different. Who knows?
But it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because I was running a record store when that happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, the store closed.
Yeah.
And I was suddenly, okay, I've got 3 degrees and I don't have a job. And my life consisted of working in a record store up until this point.
Yeah.
So I packed all my crap in a car and went down to move in with a friend of mine and just couch surf for a while. And the next thing I know, I've got a job in IT.
Completely.
That's been fairly lucrative since. And it's kind of weird that sometimes those things that seem horrible, I mean, I still wish I was running a record store. It'd be a lot more fun, but
right.
Doesn't pay a lot of the bills though.
Yeah, I feel you. And that's the thing too. It's like Mike got sick, so we couldn't tour anymore, so we had to get jobs, and then this whole thing happened, and then we come out here and like I had no skills. You know what I mean? Like I graduated from high school. I was in the band, and I would go take jobs here and there, cleaning hotel rooms, working in a factory, stuff like this. Nothing skill building, and came out here and just by chance got in with a temp agency, and I'm still doing basically the same thing, for a different company that I started back then. Is it my dream life? No.
Not yet.
I mean, no, it won't be. I sure, no, but I sure would like, obviously would prefer that we were still doing music and,
right. Well, you have released something, haven't you? Because I thought I saw something.
Music. We just, in the 90s, it was our life. We toured, we did music, and then he got sick, and you couldn't do that anymore. And then right kind of at the same time is when record sales started going down. And so even that kind of happened because we sort of had to bail before it really crashed. So a lot of our friends were sort of floundering around trying to still make it work, and we had already moved on and gotten jobs, and so it's a weird thing because on the one hand you're like, well, you should keep fighting for the dream or whatever, but then on the other hand it's like that's easy to say when you don't have health problems and
and they're kind of, and I know from a lot of my friends who are musicians that and from fairly well-known bands too, that like they don't want to tour.
No.
They're like almost 50. Yeah, right. They don't want to go on tour. They got kids are going to graduate high school. Some of them even have grandkids, and they're like, I want to go on tour.
Right. It's a hard life.
Yeah, and these same people will like hey, we're going to go play a show at a Levers. We're going to say that we're, you know, we're not going to go as the band who we actually were, you know, that type of thing.
Right.
And I don't want to, I don't want to slip up because I know some bands that do this, and I don't want to say what name they go under. But no, they'll like text, you know, and they'll say, "Hey, we're getting a band back together tonight. Well, you know, we'll be at XYZ Club or you know whatever." Yeah. Of course, not so much with COVID going on, but you know, we're just going to have a practice show and just have fun in it. And a lot of those guys are like doing this just for fun now.
That's basically kind of what it is for us now. It's like, you know, we put on a lot of shows in our house nobody ever sees. Every night Mike plays the guitar and we do songs every night.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've recorded a few of them recently for some things. We did one last Saturday that I think is going to be come out in April. But it's, you know, we do it for fun, not because not because it's the job anymore. And it really removes all the pressure from it, you know.
Well, and some of my musician friends have also told me too that with the advances in technology that they have, that you know they've got a full studio recorder basically on their cell phone. You know,
for sure, yeah, sure, yeah.
That's over exaggerating, of course,
right?
But a couple of my friends have put out singles that they put on Spotify. I won't say who, but you know, they put out singles that you know never were intended. They were something that they literally recorded in their basement. Yeah. You know, while a couple of us were sitting there listening to it, you know, and we didn't know what it was or what it was going to be, you know, and they put out the single and it's like, oh, okay. I guess this is how the music industry works now. You don't have to have a label. You don't have to have a record contract.
You really don't. You know, and it's not, you know, everybody, you know, Bandcamp.
Too, yeah.
All your stuff through Bandcamp, and now they're starting a vinyl service that you can, you know, press vinyl from Bandcamp, and it, you know, it's just we don't do that for our living anymore.
Yeah.
But it's still just as important to us as it ever was. And you know, the beauty of the way things are now too is that you don't all have to be in the same city to work together. Like Dave's in Michigan, John Fair is in Colorado. You know, anybody in the world you want to work with. Our Martin, who does all of our mastering, is in England. Like, just, you know, it's fantastic. So
yes,
like in some ways, obviously the music industry is different, right, but I think it's mostly better. You know, I really do.
I think it's more democratized than it ever was before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because yeah, like you were saying, you know, you have, and my friends are saying that too. We don't have to live in the same city anymore. Yeah. You know, and you know, so and so wants to live out in California because his wife is sick, you know, and out there getting treatment. He can get better treatment there, and we want to live here. We can still record, you know, on a Thursday night, and you know, basically send them the files. You know.
Yep.
And I think one of the things too, if you have listeners who don't realize this, musicians aren't all rich. Y'all don't.
Very few of them have two nickels to rub together.
Yeah, exactly. I knew so many indie musicians, and I still do, who were like, you know, people were shocked to find out that they had day jobs. You know?
Right.
It's like several guys I used to work with at my record store at Homer's were musicians who were on salary, and people were like, "You work? Of course, you know, I got to pay my rent,
right,
and pay for beer,
right."
And you know, and people would come in, and they'd be like, "Hey, can you sign my album?" You know, and someone would be sitting there signing an album, you know, and then you know, not have money to, you know, buy their lunch. I'd have to buy their lunch. You know, that was
actually funny for me one time. This was quite a few years ago now, but I was at work, and it was when Typo Negative came to town, and I sang with them. And I was at work like the next day, and this guy walks by, and he looks at me, and he goes, "I just saw you singing with Typo Negative." I'm like, yeah, me. That was me. So yeah, it's funny when stuff like that happens, but
well, I had a buddy who the record company was schmoozing him, and so he opened up for big band here in town, and he worked at Walgreens, and people would be like, why are you working at Walgreens? And I remember one of the other funny things was too is they took him out to California, they flew him out there, wined and dined him, and he decided he did not want the record contract. And if I told you which label it was from, you would absolutely understand why. And you probably know already. But he's like, no, I don't want to sign with this. And so he was going to go and sign with someone else. And they ended up not taking him either. But anyway, so he didn't have a way home. So he's out there in California, and we have to and this is back in the day, we had to Western Union him like $50 to get him a bus ticket back.
That's crazy.
And he's like, this is the most effed up thing ever, because I was at, Hugh Hefner's mansion 2 days ago, and people are throwing shrimp at me, and now I'm here and I need a bus ticket home.
Yeah.
And, it's like, that's the music industry. Now, luckily you were on a good label at the time when you were still out there, because Sam, I mean, he's a good guy. I worked with him a lot from the other end, but not all labels really cared.
No, Sam was definitely fair.
Yes.
I mean, you hear, we have friends who never got royalties from their labels, and
well, Sam let you keep your copyrights too, didn't he?
We own everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mike copyrights everything, so we get double payments from BMI as the artist and the
And ASCAP.
Mike's smart about this stuff, but I mean, we know people that would put albums out on a European label, and they would never see a dime, not one dime. Okay. Stuff like that. So Sam definitely is honest in regards to payments, and he's not a shyster for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it was a fun time. We had a good time in the 90s, touring and all of that. And sometimes
Did you ever play here? Did you ever play in Omaha?
No. Trance to the Sun did, though. We did that tour. We did that tour with Trance to the Sun in 95, was it? 95 or 96, the Burning Circle tour. Okay. And at one point we split ways for a couple shows, and I believe they went to Omaha and we went someplace else. Okay. But most of that tour we were together. But I'm pretty sure they played Omaha.
I was going to say, I know I saw you guys at least on one of the tours, and I don't remember if it was here or if it was up in Minneapolis.
Well, we played there, but we also played Lawrence.
It might have been down in Lawrence then that I saw you back then.
Yeah, we played.
I know I couldn't get too far away from here.
Yeah, we played Lawrence, Kansas once, and we played Minneapolis, I think 3 times. Yeah. 2 or 3 times.
Minneapolis was always cold. 4th of July. And
green. It was so pretty.
Oh, Minneapolis? It is.
Yeah.
But it's cold.
Madison. We played Madison also, which was also beautiful. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, it was good times. Sometimes I miss that. And then I think, God, if I had to play, what did we do? We did 27 or 28 shows in 30 nights. If I had to do that now, holy crap.
And did you guys have a van, or did you have
No. Okay, so the first tour with Trance to the Sun, it was me, Dave, and Mike in a geostorm. We had a rooftop carrier. We didn't even have a trailer. It was just a geostorm, and us 3 crammed into it with all of our merch, all of our equipment, etc.
Oh, man.
The second tour we did, we had a minivan.
Okay.
It was packed full of, but that was actually luxury living compared to the geostorm that we were crammed into. And then the following tours, we had a sedan. We did the Typo tour. We were in a sedan.
Nice.
Yeah. And then the tour after that, we were in a sedan. So that's kind of funny. But
One of my buddies who was in an indie band at the time, they went up to Seattle when the WTO was up there, and they had this is a fairly, I won't name drop, but a fairly well-known band at the time, and they played and I forget what the venue is down there on I want to say the Triple Door, but that's Chicago. One of the more known venues, and so they had this white van, and the WTO crowd had thought that for some reason that they were like feds or something, right? And so they tipped their van over.
oh my God.
And they're like, we're on tour, our van's on its side. What are we going to do? Because they spent all their money on their van.
Right.
And the label's like, we don't have any more money. We spent it all on the van to get you out there.
Right.
So they kind of got stuck.
Easy.
And they had to cancel like the rest of the other half of their tour.
Oh my God, I would be so pissed off. I would probably be in jail. Beating people.
Well, one of the guys was actually sleeping in the van when it happened too.
Oh my God. That's awful. Yeah, I always laugh because when we went to, we were supposed to play this show with Typo Negative in Toledo. And it was like this all-day metal festival and then us. And we were supposed to go on like right before Typo. So we pull up and we're in our Geostorm. And like Typo's got like 3 buses, and because they had 3 buses at the time for all their crew and everything.
Right.
And here we are in this little Geostorm, and Mike's like, I'm not parking here. So we parked because it was like, this is weird. So we parked like way out in the parking lot and hauled all of our equipment all the way in. We ended up canceling the show because of a whole host of reasons, but we would have gotten killed that night.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, but just that was funny. Like everyone else is like, they've got their cargo van and they've got their, trailers and their buses, and we're like, Geostorm. So funny.
Yeah.
That was good times.
Oh, the 90s. Glad there was no cell phones back then.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. Because we would all be canceled at this point if there was
kidding.
Shit that came out of our mouths back then, I'm sure. No impulse control whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah, good times. So you're drinking an RC Cola.
I'm drinking an RC Cola, yes.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I've seen one of those since the 70s.
Right? This
you
is my
get
favorite.
That at a specialty store or something?
No, there's a little grocery store just up the street. I live in one of those areas that is being gentrified, but not everybody knows it yet.
Ah.
So there's not really a mom and pop. I mean, it's a chain grocery store, but it's not one of the, real grocery stores.
Yeah.
So they still carry things like RC Cola, and they carry a lot of ethnic food and things.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
God, I want one now.
I know. I love this because it's got less sugar, and so RC was really, really big here, and so a lot of people were like, oh my God, that was what I would drink every day at first period. I'd drink an RC and a bag of Skittles, and that was my breakfast. No,
yeah, of course.
So
that's funny.
Yeah, it's still around here. I don't know if you can find it in the rest of the country. I don't think I've ever seen it.
I'm curious now. I'll have, next time I order groceries, I'll have to check. So I forget, does it taste more like Pepsi, huh?
A little bit, kind of.
Yeah. I remember it sort of tasting like Pepsi, Dr. Peppery kind of.
Yeah, it's not nearly as sweet as like Coke or anything else.
Yeah.
So
gosh.
We should see if RC will sponsor your
That would be
RC Cola.
I mean, the can is even still 70s.
Yeah, it is. It's the same old can that they used to have.
That's awesome.
They haven't changed it at all.
I know. Every once in a while, I'll see somebody post drinking Tab, and I'm like,
they still make that?
They do.
Oh my God.
And the funny thing is I never had Tab because it was popular when I was a kid. And so there was no reason for me to be drinking Diet Pop when I was a child, right? So I'm deeply curious about what it tastes like. So I'll have to go and.
I just remember it always kind of tasted like bubble gum a little
Oh,
bit.
huh.
Kind of tasted like not good bubble gum either.
Yeah. Like that really hard stuff and the
Yeah.
hard pink bubble gum. I'll have to try to find that in RC. I guarantee there's some place here that has that. There has to be.
I would think so.
Yeah. It seems like a hipster thing for sure.
Yeah. PBR is really popular here too.
That's funny. You know, and I had never had Mellow Yellow until like a couple years ago. Oh my God, it's so good. They have it in do you guys have Firehouse subs?
Yes.
They have it in their machines.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, you know how they have those fancy machines that you can make like 12 trillion combinations?
Yeah.
They have Mellow Yellow, and I had like grape Mellow Yellow one day, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever had.
I didn't even know they made grape Mellow Yellow. I always thought Mellow Yellow was basically just a poor man's
Mountain Dew.
Mountain Dew.
Yeah, it kind of is, but it was so delicious. But I
can't drink. They still make Shasta.
Shasta's delicious. Yeah, we had that in Ohio. Yeah.
Shasta was Kmart, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was Kmart, but it was definitely like poor kid soda.
Yeah.
But now I think it's like cool.
I know, right?
Like Faygo used to be the generic off-brand pop, and now it's like Faygo.
That's what all the juggalos drink, isn't it? The Faygo?
Probably. I try to avoid that set. No offense to any juggalos that may be watching. I'm actually super fascinated by that whole culture. Like I go down the whole on YouTube watching juggalo video, like documentary type videos about that. Like that's another thing I'm interested. Like I told you, I'm a voyeur. I love people watching and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I can go down rabbit holes on like cults and like anything that's cultish, and that whole juggalo thing is sort of cultish. I find it fascinating.
I don't know how, but somehow Omaha, like the juggalo thing kind of went around Omaha. And most people's preconceived notion of what Omaha is, they would think that there would be a lot of juggalos here. It's like, no, not really.
I don't think we had them in Ohio either, and that's pretty close to Detroit. But I don't remember having juggalos around Northeast Ohio either much.
I think the first time I ever even came across the term juggalo was out in like Colorado. And then it was, and I never even heard of ICP, and I worked in a record store.
Yeah.
I was like, Insane Clown Pot. There's a cult around this? What?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really fascinating. The funny thing is those two, the ICP, those guys, like, they're decent dudes.
Yeah.
They're always defending like children and like sex assault victims, and like I'm like, this is really interesting that like I've seen them on there was some famous thing that happened not too long ago with some child sex thing or something, but they were like guests on these talk shows talking about it, like, and somebody's going to know what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, I turned the comments off because I don't want people being dicks in the comments, but I just don't have the patience for it. But yeah, they're kind of interesting that they seem very like good dudes.
Well, and I remember too, the something of the Juggalos, the meeting of the Juggalos, whatever, it happened to be the same day as like an alt-right Nazi fest or something in DC. And I forget what the story was behind this, but they were basically like giving the middle finger to Donald Trump the whole time. And they're like, we don't want anything to do with them. And I remember a lot of my friends were like, oh crap, I can't hate the Juggalos now. So
right? Right. Like yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic there. Um, yeah, I don't know. I
But
don't know. I don't
it
know
was
what.
it was something to the effect like a bunch of the juggalos actually got into physical altercations that they didn't start with a bunch of the Proud Boys or something like that. And they didn't start it, but it kind of sounded like they
But
finished
they
it.
ended it.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah,
So
that's cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated by all that kind of cult stuff. Scientology, love it. Sometimes I think, do you ever do this? Okay, I'm probably weird, but I know I'm weird. But like with Scientology, I find it so fascinating that it's like this completely insular community where you could just kind of check out from the rest of the world and just go be in Scientology.
yeah.
There's a weird appeal to that.
Yeah. It's kind of like the antithesis of being Amish.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
think?
Maybe bad. But yeah, they more like yeah, it is very bizarre from what I know of it. I
Like
don't and
I feel like I understand how people get sucked into cults because you could just sort of check out of the rest of your life, go live in a cult somewhere, not have to have a job. Well, I don't know, maybe they have to have jobs, but I don't know. I feel like for people that want to disconnect from the world, it would
yeah,
be easy to get sucked into something like that.
definitely. Yeah.
I
But
find a strange appeal in that too.
what's very bizarre about that is that Scientology aims for people who have a lot of money
Right.
only. And
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe that insulation is something that they yearn for because they have so much money and fame,
Yeah.
or if it's something that, I yeah, that's just a bizarre thing to me. Scientology is going back to the aliens thing.
Right.
Um, L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer.
Right.
So it's kind of like you guys know that this is. I won't say that because
I
you'll.
know. No, I know. I know exactly what you're saying. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
real fascinating to me. Any kind of thing like that, and like, um, and unfortunately, all cults are basically abusive to their followers. If they weren't, it would be kind of a sweet deal because you could just be in this group of people that you all sort of, agree on the same stuff and live this sort of communal life and detached from everything else around you. I mean, it sounds kind of idyllic if it's not an abusive situation, but it's always an abusive situation, right?
well,
The balance
I
of power.
think only the ones that are in abusive situations get called cults. Otherwise, they're called a religion.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think that the line is if you still have like your own autonomy, like you're not beholden to such strict adherence to whatever. You know what I mean? Like they're not like taking like demanding that you give them your paycheck and you have to marry this person and you're only allowed to sleep with the guy that's in the leader and
Yeah.
yeah, that's where it gets sketchy, where it gets
Yeah.
sketchy. Otherwise, to each their own, right?
Well,
Because you're not getting abused and you're not abusing anybody, do your thing. But
I remember when I was in college, there was an investigation into a cult in town. And my roommate at the time was like, I don't understand how anybody can be part of a cult and blah, 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 blah. Turned out what the cult was actually a super fundamentalist Christian church that my roommate actually had belonged to. And the police were investigating it because, you know, I don't want to step on anybody's religious toes or anything, but it was kind of one of those things that they were doing some odd practices in the Christian religion that people were having questions about, and and my roommate would tell me some of these things about what it was. so that kind of put in my mind, what defines a cult and what defines a religion?
Right.
And I remember hearing one time too in a religion class when I was in college about someone had called the first Christians that Jesus called.
Hmm.
And they were actually called that up until, about 300 AD or something, until, um, Constantine converted to Christianity. But it kind of is, where is that fine line between cult,
Right.
religion, and how do you know, what defines a cult?
Right. Yeah, it's
And
interesting.
and we only hear about the cults where, the leader sleeps with the,
Sure.
the children and all these bad things, but there's got to be cults that they don't do that, right? I mean,
Well, I'm sure there's probably a lot of cults that are actually cults, but
yeah,
they're like not oppressive enough to have attention paid to them or
yeah.
something. You
Well,
know,
and
think about like a lot of like maybe like rural churches or small
yes,
churches where, the pastor or whoever has like ultimate control over your life basically.
right.
Um, but maybe not necessarily in a super obvious
Well, I
abusive
can,
way.
from growing up where I did, I mean, I would run into every now and then people who were members of a church that would speak in tongues. I mean, speaking
Sure.
in tongues is actually fairly common, but
Sure.
I would also run into people who snake handle,
Yeah.
you know, um, and that's not just a Southern thing. I have actually known people who handled snakes in church before. Other kind of weird practices,
Yeah.
that I won't say weird, because
Right.
everybody has their own
Right.
religion, and their own beliefs, and
Right.
some of the things that Buddhists and Christians do be strange
Sure.
to other people. But fire handling or snake handling or stuffing coals, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Also, some people who would refuse, people who are anti-vaxxers are that
Right.
way, as they, or people who refuse blood transfusions.
Right.
Um, that's a fairly mainstream denomination of a church,
Yes.
that doesn't allow that. So it's kind of
Yeah.
weird.
Well, and even, like where Mike grew up, there was a lot of Christian reform.
Oh yes.
They don't, I don't think they use deodorant. I think the women have to wear pants. So it's just like subtle things. It's not like anything oppressive,
Right.
but it's still a weird controlling type thing.
Well, I grew up, there was a Mennonite community near where I grew up. And I didn't realize that was actually kind of unusual. Like some of the things
Right.
that they did.
Yeah.
Because, I'd seen it all my life. And so I thought that was actually kind of normal. I thought most places had like small Mennonite communities, where they didn't bank, where they didn't have, didn't really deal with money, or didn't, built their own farm
Sure.
equipment, or didn't use tractors, that kind of thing. I didn't realize that was much until I was much older, that those were kind of unusual communities. And
Yeah.
in some ways I kind of like that, I kind of wanted to join them.
Yeah. There is an appeal to it because, like, likewise, where I grew up in Northeast Ohio, there were Amish people around. So,
Right.
like, you'd go to the store, there'd be Amish people there. They were all over the place. It wasn't a strange thing. It didn't even like, you're like, okay, they're Amish. It was obvious because they dress a certain way, but it
Right.
wasn't like it was peculiar to see because you're used to seeing them around all the time. And I
Right.
remember the first time Mike came to Ohio, he was like, oh, we went someplace and he's like, oh wow, there's Amish people here, because where he's from, there were no Amish people or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing where you don't realize that that's different because you're
Well,
around it all the time, kind of.
my dad growing up, my grandfather dad growing up, was Brethren. So if you're not familiar with what Brethren are, you've got the Amish who are here, which are like Luddites. They don't believe in using electricity or anything like that. And then they have the Mennonites who are familiar with the Amish. And usually if an Amish person has to buy something, you have to go through a Mennonite.
Oh.
So Mennonites are a little bit more societal. They're kind of the buffer zone between, people like that. Well,
And
my dad grew up Brethren, which is kind of like just above the Mennonites.
okay.
So they still use farm machinery and things like that, but like my dad, and this is another thing that it never even occurred to me that it was weird. Like I said, we grew our own food. I didn't know you could buy canned green beans.
Right.
And so that was something my dad grew up with, and I grew up with. It was like completely bizarre to me. And first time I saw green beans in a store, or eating spaghetti. What? You eat things that you don't grow? Okay.
Right.
And and these were things that, like in my 20s, I was kind of going, oh, I'm kind of weird. All right. Even though I had a TV, we didn't watch TV a lot. We had a radio, but this is before cable. So I was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. There was no TV to come in. I think we got PBS, and that was about it where I lived. And, I had the radio. So, of course, I listened to the rock station, that was 200 miles away, because it had a giant antenna. But I realized that I was really kind of isolated with these kind of things because like my father had never taken out a loan, had only paid cash for cars, didn't believe in credit cards, and these other things that Brethren believe in, that, the lending money is a sin. It's a mortal sin. So the person who's doing it is, and I forget what that's called. It's
apostate or something.
Yes. Thank you. I can't think of it.
I don't know how I know that, but
yeah. But, and it was a mortal sin, to have that. And I remember one time when I went to work, because I never taken out a credit card. I didn't even know how to use a credit card.
Right.
I didn't know how to apply for a loan when I bought a car.
Right.
And I remember my first real job, not the record store job, but my first real job, they sent me out to Las Vegas to do a training, and I had to have a credit card to put my incidentals at the hotel on. And I'm like, I don't have a credit card. I've never used a credit card. They're like, well, do you have a debit card? No, I don't. I write checks.
Right.
And it was like this weird kind of, okay.
This world opened up to you.
Yeah, but I kind of wonder, I understand though that people in those cults and not necessarily cults, but in these strange religions and that kind of thing, I kind of see where they're coming from, because I had that kind of weird, worldview shock myself in my 20s.
Yeah.
And it's like, I driven a car, of course. I didn't know you had to finance one to buy one.
Right.
That kind of thing. First time renting an apartment, I didn't know you had to have a credit check. I didn't have any credit.
Right.
I didn't have nothing because I never used a credit.
And there is an appeal to that those lifestyles, I think, because they are detached from the sort of rat race that the rest of us are beholden to, know. So I can see the appeal of it for sure. It's almost like a bury your head in the sand almost kind of thing, like that stuff's going on over there. Let's just stay over here in our own little bubble and not pay any attention to any of it.
What was that M. Night Shyamalan movie about that? The
Village.
The Village.
Yeah, that was a good movie. Of course, I figured it out before the end of the film, but whatever. I'm a genius. No, but yeah, I mean, I can see how people would want to do that, even, like the whole hippie commune thing. But the problem is people are inherently flawed. So you're never going to find that sort of utopic, idyllic place where there's not drama, because people are just drama.
Yeah.
Even
I knew some people who grew up in hippie communes too. I mean, a lot of people our age,
right,
are the products of that, because the 70s were weird. But I knew some people who were like that, and they grew up in the hippie commune, and they were, kind of had the same situation as I did. What? You buy green beans out of can?
Yeah. The thing is people, I mean, my grandparents raised all their food. I mean, they lived in West Virginia, up in the mountains. They raised all their own food and stuff. My parents, we lived in Ohio, which was not rural. I mean, it was rural, but it wasn't like, we were like 35-minute drive from Akron, Cleveland, and Youngstown. So it's not like we were out in the middle of nowhere. And we had a huge garden. My mom canned food because it was how she grew up, you know.
Yeah.
Back in the day, people didn't go buy everything. You know, you had to grow your own stuff and make your own noodles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of that. I mean, good thing I don't have to do that because I don't have that skill set. But it, it's a healthier life for sure.
Right. Well, what's interesting is like here in the store that we're actually we actually have some cottage core, which I didn't know there was a term for this. But there is a movement of people who kind of want to go back to that kind of agrarian sense of things, you know, and not use a microwave and not, you know, eat canned food. So we have a whole bunch of stuff in here that we're kind of utilizing that, you know, like we're selling canning supplies. We're selling, you know, herbs and teas and things for people and things like that because, you know, we want people to kind of get back to the source of where their inner spirituality comes from, you know, which some of that comes directly from the land, comes from the soil, you know, that you work with. You know,
Yeah. I mean, we know we need the sun. How many people are vitamin D deficient, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Especially in the God community.
Yeah. I actually am super D deficient. And it's funny because I said to my doctor, I'm like, it's so weird because she's like, even if you just walk outside for 10 minutes a day and just get a little bit of sun. And I'm like, it's so weird that I live someplace that's sunny
Right.
98% of the time. And she says, yeah, but people don't go outside here because it's so sunny.
Right.
Hot all the time. So like tons of people in Arizona are actually vitamin D deficient, which it just seems funny to me that you're in a sunshine state and don't get enough sun. Like I'm pale. I'm probably paler here than I was when I lived in Ohio. I actually went out and hiked and did all kinds of stuff there. Here I do all my walking at night because the sun is just so oppressive. Even when it's cold out, it's just like you can't see, and it's like, you know, whatever.
I had to go down for work when I lived in Seattle. I had to go down for work and I think it was in Tempe. And I remember I got out of the plane and I was like a naked mole rat because I hadn't seen sun in like months, and it was like, yeah,
Yeah.
And it was so bad because like you don't see the sunlight in Seattle, and
Right.
like my eyes were watering, and it was like it wasn't even like a sunny day. It was like just a normal day down there, and it wasn't even all that hot. It was, you know, which in Tempe not that hot, is about 80, you know,
Yeah.
and I remember someone had to stop at a gas station and buy me some cheap sunglasses because my eyes kept watering and I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, it's hard. It is. It's bright, man. And I need prescription glasses too. So I didn't have sunglasses for a long time. And so you're outside and you're just like, I can't see. Finally got sunglasses and I was like, oh, I can see again. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I belong. I need a happy medium. Runs on the cool side, I think. Wherever that place is. Scotland? I don't know.
Scotland, I've heard, is pretty rainy. I've never been overseas, so.
Yeah, I know. I follow this profile on Instagram and it's like Switzerland vacations or something.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, that place. It's like a fairy tale. I don't even know how that exists. I don't know how places like that exist. But
yeah, I actually did some research into my dad's family's background. They live in a little town called Mossigen, which is only about 30 miles from the Swiss border. And it's like, why did you come here? Well, I can see why he came here because the land looks exactly the same. And
yeah,
things were kind of bad in Prussia, you know, back when the wars were going on and stuff.
sure.
You know, it's like, but it's absolutely beautiful there. It's in the Swabian Mountains, and you know, and it's rolling hills, and you know, I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful there. I want to go there.
I know.
You know, to see where he came from. You know, and it's especially cool. It's too because Europe has I mean, the church where he was baptized, where my great grandfather was baptized, is still there. It's still
Yeah.
called the same thing. And it's like, I would love to be able to go and see that, and
Yeah. Someday. I know. It's such a weird. We're bummed that we never made it to Europe to play shows because it would have been a good. You get to go to play shows, but you also get to go to experience the place.
yeah.
I'm like, we're kind of like hoping that at some point maybe we can do a little bit of that when the
Transito's
world.
son, Transito's son toured over there, didn't they? You weren't with them at that point?
Did Trance's son go to Europe?
I thought they played. I thought that they did have a European tour.
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I don't think. No, we had some offers come up, but we could never say yes to them.
Oh,
And actually, we had an offer that we did say yes to, and then everything happened. So all the COVID stuff happened. So I don't know if at some point we are going to get over there, but I mean, that's the goal. But I would rather just go and not have to play a show
yeah.
and wreck it with being nervous the entire time because I'm always nervous anyway. So
Is Transito's son still putting out music?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. I when I lived up in Portland, Ashkelon,
Mm-hmm.
lived up there, and one of the guys I was actually a demo analyst with the guy who was drumming for him. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah. So that was kind of cool.
I know. I feel like that's where we should live because like everybody we know is there.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but like we would already have this established group of people if we lived up there.
When I lived up there, Portland was great, but it was kind of like magical La La Land. It was like, I used to call it Peter Panville because, everybody was a millennial. No one ever grew up, myself included.
Yeah.
And, everybody smoked weed all day and no one had real jobs. And, even though they had 6 jobs at the same time.
Right.
And it was really bizarre because like Oliver Platt would cut in front of me in line at, Safeway and stuff like that, and just really bizarre. But when I moved out of there, things had started to take a strange right turn. And it got, from people who I know who still live out there, they're kind of not liking it anymore because it got a little, skinheadish up there.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I have seen some of that in the news.
We always used to joke that, you go out past Gresham and it's Aryan country, and it got a lot worse from what people have told
That
me.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it was really weird because it is, and believe me, I'm from Nebraska. It was the whitest place I ever lived.
Yeah.
It was super white up there.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of white supremacists here in Arizona too.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah. My nose always runs when I do these podcasts. I don't know why. I learned after the first one, always have a Kleenex nearby. My nose is always running. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Well, this is fun.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, those are fun stories.
And let me ramble on and just talk about nothing for a while.
Well, hey, we learned.
Since COVID's been going on, I've kind of been socially isolated, so it's kind of nice to like talk to other humans.
Yeah, so I already worked from home. I've been working from home for like 9 years, but we're not social anyway. So we would meet we would go out to dinner with Brett and his wife Sarah from Audra, like
okay.
once a month or twice a month, we'd go meet them for dinner and hang out and stuff. But you know, and some of Dirk's friends from school, I'm friends with their parents and stuff like that. But we're mostly pretty isolated. Like we don't go to shows. We don't, you know,
Yeah.
we don't do anything. So our life really hasn't changed that much, except for that just Dirk's doing his schooling from home and Mike's working from home like 2 days a week. But our life hasn't really drastically changed that much.
That's
But
what I noticed too. Yeah, mine hasn't changed a whole lot because I don't really like people. So yeah.
yeah, I'm weird because I say that I don't like people, but then I love people. So I guess it's more that I'm disappointed in people and they hurt my heart. Especially the people that I love who have very, very, very different ideas about the way the world should be.
Yes.
It like it wounds me, like knowing that they hate people like me. They don't hate me because they know me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But if they
But
didn't know me, they would hate me. So I get very like I have this weird sense of mourning all the time because I feel like I've lost a lot of people.
one of the things I noticed when I moved back to Nebraska is I like the people who okay, so Omaha is kind of different from the rest of the state. And Omaha is actually one of the best places. I absolutely love it. And I love the people here because I've lived in a lot of other places. I moved here from Kansas. That's where my last job was in Kansas. And we'll leave it at that. But uh, I'm very, very happy to not be in Kansas.
Yeah.
And just like you said, the attitude of the people are different here than what people normally have a stereotype of people in Nebraska. People are smart, people read books, people discuss things, people have ideas. Um, people think here. Not everybody's conservative. Some people are. Even the conservative people, though, aren't those cruel, hateful people that I've ran into in other
Right.
places. And I despise the fact that those people kind of take over some places that are great, places that are otherwise great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely it's just such a strange state of things because like I was a Republican a while ago
Yeah,
and they have run me so far the other way that I mean I can't feasibly see ever voting for a Republican ever again. And I don't even want this to get political because who cares? But it's not even about political party. It's about like morality. Like
yeah,
it didn't really used to matter if you were a Republican or a Democrat. The line wasn't it the line was like this between the two, and now it's like this between the two.
yeah,
And it's like there's just I don't I just feel this mourning like all the time for people that I'm shocked by them, you know,
right.
and kind of at some point I had to just like either they cut me off, and I'm talking people very, very close, family cut me off, or I had to remove myself because I couldn't deal with seeing that, you know,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
protection thing. But it's a sad state of affairs. I don't know. I'm hoping that things get better once shit dies down.
yeah.
You know? Like
Um,
I'm really hoping that the loudmouths that have taken over shut the fuck up at some point
right.
and things come a little bit back to the center again, you know?
I'll tell you what the defining moment for me was. I was in a bar in the unnamed city in Kansas, that's Wichita, that I lived in before, and there was a guy in there who literally was shouting white power.
Yeah.
And I got kicked out of the bar because I took after him with a pool cue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm going back to Omaha because that shit don't fly here. You know,
Yeah, it's
if
sad.
someone said that in a bar here, they wouldn't walk out.
As
You
they
know?
should.
Yeah. And
That should not be tolerated by society.
I mean, that is not a Republican thing.
It's not. That's the thing.
That is not what the Republican, you know, it, that's just it. It's how has that become a Republican value? It should not be. You know,
That's
and I live in a fairly conservative state. I live in a fairly conservative city in a fairly conservative state, but we voted blue here. And it
yeah.
was because of crap like that.
Well, in Arizona, I mean, split.
Oh yeah, you voted blue too, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. People were just tired of, I don't know. We shouldn't get too far into this, though. People can't leave comments, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I mean, and it is, and I don't like that it's become so like us versus them, because it should just be human decency. If you're a decent human being, you should be against certain awful things. Like that's
Yeah.
not, that shouldn't be defined by a political party. It should be human decency, you
Well,
know?
and I've had friends of mine who were conservative Christian people who are good people, you know, who have said to me in private, you know, hey, I don't like blue politics. I don't like X, Y, and Z about them. But I really, really don't like this other side of it more than
Right.
you know, what, and I pointed them, well, you know, there's the Constitutional Party, there's the Libertarian Party. The Libertarians are kind of got a bad name right now too. I said there's other candidates that you can vote for who aren't, you know, necessarily Biden or, you know, the other one, the
other
great
one. He who
and
shall remain unnamed.
yeah, I'm afraid to say his name because every time I do, it like he appears on CNN.
Yeah,
But,
like conjures him. Like Steven.
but you know, they're like, I believe, you know, in these certain values that I have, and I, you know, and that have nothing to do with what I see in the Republican Party right now. And I'm like, okay, well, here, I'll help you with some of these people that, you know,
They're there.
here it is, you know, Ben Sasse in our state, you know, Ben Sasse hates the former president. I don't like most of his politics, but he has went on record and went against the former president many, many, many times, and like has had hate mail and actually has to have guards around him now because of it. But it's like, if you don't have to agree with me, but you do have to disagree with
Bad stuff.
certain bad things, yeah, that should not even be a question. You know, these are questions we answered, you know, in 1860.
Right.
You know, we actually had a war about this, and then we had another one in 1940s. You know, so
yeah,
these aren't questions that we have as to what's right and wrong in these things.
yeah.
And I totally diverged a lot from the aliens that I started with. But
Yeah, I know. It's depressing to me. But hopefully things kind of chill out, and as we get some distance, we'll get back to the center a little bit better, you know?
well, and the thing I've noticed too is that people are starting to bitch about Biden's policies. You know, like, oh, Biden's going to raise taxes. Okay. I don't mind you saying that. I have no problem with that.
Thing to complain about.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to complain about policy, that's perfect. Go ahead. Argue with me about policy all you want. I may even agree with you on some of that stuff. When you argue whether, you know, whether you state whether, you know, there should be segregation, like literally, really, this is really still a fucking question.
Right.
You have, seriously, you actually think that we should ask this question? No.
Right.
No. Don't talk to me.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, and that's how I think if that's how it used to be, it would be like bickering over taxes or, you know, universal health care or stuff like that, not the morality of paying off a prostitute or or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, like,
Just weird.
I mean,
And
and
mine,
I've said this before too. It's like politics should be, do I put a stop sign up at the street or put a Walmart in here? It shouldn't
right,
be, do we put kids in cages? You know,
right.
this is
Yeah,
not a question. We do not ask these things as Americans. We should not have to ask these things.
right.
So yeah, if people want to go back to bickering about, do we put a stoplight or a stop sign at the intersection? I think that that's a great step forward in our evolution as Americans.
Yeah, agreed. 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 I guess on that note, I always said I wasn't going to talk about politics on this stuff, and we really didn't talk too much about it. Just because it's such a like divisive thing now over everything. But then I stop and I thinking about like people are divided over like if you say you like RC cola, somebody's gonna be like, yeah, but it causes cancer.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh,
You can't you can't say anything without somebody saying something contrary about it. And it's just like I don't even discuss a lot of times stuff I like because I know, like I posted the picture of Jared Leto the other day as the Joker for the new Justice League coming up, the new one coming out. And there's people in the comments ripping it, and I'm just like, I just
oh
want to
my
look.
God. I put something on my Facebook about liking the new Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I became an anti-Semite. I'm like,
Ah.
I, okay, Gal Gadot was in the Israeli army. Yeah, I knew that because she's Israeli and you kind of have to. But I,
Right.
I don't hate anybody.
Like
I
I
guess
just
not anti-Semite. She would be anti-Arabic, right? But
yeah, it's really strange. I mean, but it's just how it always is. Or like if like I like DC stuff slightly more than Marvel. And so it's like if you post DC stuff, then you got the Marvel people go, "That's so stupid, Bob. DC sucks." And I'm just like, dude, I like all of it. I don't have to. You don't have to make everything a war. Like,
yeah,
chill.
and it's not even just that. It's like I get people who are like, I'm going to boycott your store because you support blah 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 and you support Nazis. It's like, no. How do you get that from I like Captain Marvel, or
Right.
or I
Right.
like Wonder Woman.
Right. Yeah. I know. It's
I'm
depressing.
almost afraid to make comments on Facebook anymore, because it's and I closed my Facebook down so that my comments can't be seen by anybody else.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. I used to be like a pretty open book, and like I used to just post whatever I had on my mind. And then
right,
I got so tired of having to like defend the most innocuous stuff that
yeah,
now I'm like, I'm not gonna post about like watching the Wonder Woman movie
yeah,
because I didn't want to hear about it. Like I didn't want to hear
yeah.
people telling me you're wrong because you think this about the movie, or you're stupid, or whatever. The
Well, yeah.
whole Gal
I mean,
Gadot.
I wasted like an hour of my life because people were like bashing me about liking Wonder Woman, and I'm like, okay, granted, it wasn't that great of a movie, whatever. If you want to say the movie sucks, I'm okay with that, but don't call me, don't tell me I don't like Arabs because
See, I don't even like that because it's kind of like, imagine someone comes to your house and goes, "God, your furniture's ugly." It's really the same thing. Like you wouldn't go into someone's house and go, well, "That's a stupid paint color on your walls." So when you're posting, "I liked the Wonder Woman movie," essentially people ripping on it to you is like telling you that your taste is bad.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, like you can have that opinion all day long. You don't need to tell me about it.
right. Well, and the other thing is too is I worked in a music store, so definitely I have better taste in music than almost anybody else. And that's another thing too is, so I'm used to people bashing me about things like that, and that's fine, but it's like I really when you make things like that political, I really don't care at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, and I think I even posted this on yours a couple days ago about Marilyn Manson. It's like, I've always hated Marilyn Manson. I hated Marilyn Manson before hating Marilyn Manson was cool.
I know.
You know?
Same. Same. Yeah. Yeah. I never liked that garbage. I
He
didn't
was,
like music, didn't like him as a person.
I didn't like his music.
Yeah.
And I feel like I said, I on your post, I said I feel vindicated now because I used to have the goth section, which is kind of funny. And yes, you were in there, but I had a goth section in my record store that was incredibly well selling, and we would have A&R guys come in and be like, "Well, you should put Marilyn Manson in there. Or you should put, Godhead Silo in there, or Godsmack." Actually, Godhead Silo. But and they would try to convince me to put, like Gravity Kills. I remember that when the A&R guy for Gravity Kills came in, and sorry, Gravity Kills, if you guys are listening or whatever. But I was like, no, this doesn't fit with what the direction of what we're going. And Marilyn Manson's A&R reps would always come in. They would always try to take and put stuff in there. And I'm like, no, I don't want to support this. This does not fit the aesthetic that we're going with. I don't like these guys. This band sucks. Well, you got Type O Negative in there. Yeah. Because Type O Negative doesn't suck. We had Nine Inch Nails in there, and it's like, well, it fits.
Yeah.
Fits with what we're doing. Marilyn Manson's just garbage.
Yeah. He just, to me, always seemed like a poser.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And then, we were around him a couple times, and it just was not a good situation. So, and I'm so tired of people saying like, well, what did you expect from him? It's like, I don't expect him to tie up women in his house and like torture them mentally and rape them.
Yeah.
There's a far cry from somebody being a shocking artist to that's what they're doing at home. Nobody expects that to happen to them.
Right.
Right. None of those girls went into it going, I'm sure this is going to happen to me.
Right.
Whatever.
Well,
But the whole.
If you want to talk shock rock, Alice Cooper never did anything like that.
Sure.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
After quit drinking.
But I mean, people sit there and on the one hand they tell you don't judge the guy because of his image back in the 90s when people were accusing him of the whole Columbine goth thing and whatever. Oh no, you can't judge him by his image. But now that it's come out that he's abused all these women, they're saying, why are you surprised? Look at his image. I thought we weren't supposed to judge him based on his image.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay, so here's another weird one. Ryan Adams. When all that stuff, not Brian, Ryan. Right? I don't know how familiar you are with that.
I don't know who that is.
Well, Ryan Adams was he was an alt country singer, Americana. He used to sing for Whiskey Town. Sorry, I'm really big into Americana music and that now. But Ryan Adams used to write songs about like, how he hated women and how he would treat them like crap and everything like that. And then when it came out that he actually did hate women and that he beat up a couple of them and had sexted with a couple, underage girls and this type of stuff. Yeah. And it's like, hello, this was right in his songs.
Right.
Writing about what he knows, so sometimes you do have to judge a book by its cover because
it is though. It's a hard line though, because sometimes people put on stories like you're telling a story about something that's not necessarily you. So there's like this weird fine line between it,
Yeah, and like, going back to Alice Cooper, Alice Cooper's shock rock isn't who he is.
Exactly. So where is the line? Where do right. It's just like that would be like somebody accusing Stephen King of being like a psycho because he writes books about, right. Whatever. It's hard when somebody is presenting an image to know how much of that image is fabricated versus real. But
and you ran into that as a musician too in the goth scene, back in the 90s. Sure. People probably think you drank blood and scared children and things like that.
I mean, I don't know that they thought that, but definitely there was a perception that we were different than what we really are.
Right.
And some people were not very pleased by that, but whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I think people should listen to people when they tell you that something awful happened to them.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that enough people have come forward and said awful things happened to him where he's concerned. And I know enough people that know him personally, and I've been around him enough to know he was garbage when he was around us to think there's probably some truth to whatever they're saying. And they've got a lot of proof,
I
photographs, text messages, videos, voicemails to prove their story. So,
and I'd heard plenty of things. Granted, it's all hearsay,
sure.
but I knew people in the industry who would tell me stories, and when you hear enough from enough people that there's enough overlap, you kind of begin to believe some things.
There
So
has to be some truth to it.
there
Yeah.
has to be some truth there somewhere. Now, maybe not everything's true, like I doubt that he took out two of his ribs, but things like
Right.
probably the myth I'm talking about. But
Right.
and just from people that I know who have not only toured with, well, not toured with him, but who were musicians around him at the time, and they've all told consistent stories about
Sure.
things that he's done. Not just you, but other
Yeah.
people I know have said exactly the same thing. And talking about the myth and the reality, I was going to say when you were saying that the myth and the reality not being the same. I remember one time I went out with B&B Nation. I got invited to the bus after a show, and we ended up eating pancakes at IHOP. It was the most boring, thing ever. And these guys were on stage, they're going crazy and blah blah blah, and it's okay. They eat pancakes at IHOP. And
Yeah.
when I didn't hear those things about Marilyn Manson.
Right. Right.
I did hear a lot about coke vendors, and I heard a lot about. I won't go any further with that, but yeah, there's enough that I've heard that there has to be some validity.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or where there's smoke, it's usually coming from meth or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. People, man. On that note, for I think the third time.
Yeah, I keep talking, so it's my fault.
Well, I keep doing it too. My dog is making some really gross noises over here. Anyway, so if you hear some weirdness, it's the dog, not me.
Okay.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for being my first guest that I kind of didn't know in real life.
I have met you. Well, I was going to say, I think I've met you once before, but this was back in the days.
Yeah.
I think you signed an album for me way back when. So, I'm sure you remember me though.
Yeah. A lot of years ago. Yeah. I can't remember what I did last week half the time.
Well, I can't remember which show it was at. I think it was in either Minneapolis or Lawrence, but I did meet you.
Yeah.
And I've been a lot of the project artists, but of course, you run into 1,000 people that you don't ever remember. Of course.
Yeah, my memory used to be a lot better than it is now, but that's what happens with age.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the time that I got to talk about aliens.
Yeah, it was fun. So if you ever have any other weird stuff happen, because I'm super interested in like the creepy stuff. So yeah, if you ever come up with any more creepy tales, then
I'll let you know.
Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tara.
I'll talk to you again soon. And this should go up tonight. So look for some links. All right. Bye.
Bye.